shortly hear from Dr. Lisa Ryan, who is head of the Department of Sport, Exercise and Nutrition at the Atlantic Technological University, previously known as GMIT. She's a member of the not-for-profit lobby group Progressive Rugby. The focus on the link between concussion and dementia has intensified in recent times, with former Welsh international Ryan Jones detailing his diagnosis at the age of 41. He follows countryman Alex Popham in documenting his story, and England's World Cup winning prop Steve Thompson, who broke his silence last year. Dr. Lisa Ryan, welcome to Saturday Sport. And my first question is, what exactly is Progressive Rugby? Who are you? What do you represent?
So I suppose we're a non-profit rugby union lobby group, really, and what we are is a collection of individuals, so former rugby players, academics, medics, people that just love rugby, ex-referees and all the rest, and really coming together, focusing on player welfare. That's the main focus of the group, and to ensure really the longevity of rugby as a sport by protecting players.
You think radical action is needed?
We know that there are certainly some indications that repetitive head impacts can lead to neurological damage, and as rugby is a sport where there are collisions, where there can be repetitive head impacts, we believe that there is a need for urgent action to make sure that we are looking after players and ensuring that protocols are fit for purpose and that recovery times, contact, etc. are all modified to have player welfare at the heart of everything we do.
And what do you make of what's there at the moment?
We as a group have collated all the available evidence and have outlined, and it's available off our website in our open letter, outlined a number of areas that we feel could be looked at, particularly around how much contact is happening in training. Again, also around what the recovery protocols are like for return to play following concussion in elite rugby players. And there are a number of key factors that we think could be addressed by World Rugby, which again would help really with the longevity of the game and also with ultimately protecting the players.
Do you worry about the future of the game if there isn't significant change?
We do, because everybody in Progressive Rugby is there because we absolutely adore the game and we love rugby. But at the moment we do feel that it's at a critical point where we know that the players themselves at the Irish Concussion Research Centre that myself and Ed Daly founded a number of years ago, we have done a lot of work with ex-professional players who have openly spoken about how worried they are about their future brain health. And I think it is a responsibility for those that are over the game to ensure that they're looking at the available evidence and that the protocols are being adapted and modified once we do find out more and more information about how we can manage brain health and protect our players.
How would you feel about current HIA protocols, for instance?
Well, we were happy to see that they had at least been increased from 6 to 12 days, but the recommendation from the group as a whole and from many of the individuals that are working in brain health with sports players has recommended that it should be longer. For instance, in the amateur game, it's 21 days, and our argument has always been that an amateur brain and an elite brain are the exact same, and why are we treating them differently? The accelerated protocol, as it's called, that players go through at an elite level doesn't make sense given the evidence that we have.
It's been a significant week for the whole issue of brain injury and concussion in the game. We have legal proceedings being brought by 185 former professionals against World Rugby, the RFU and the Welsh Rugby Union, and those proceedings due to be presented to court this week. And then the Irish Times revealed that former Irish rugby players are to take legal proceedings against the IRFU over brain injuries. So it is very much coming to a sort of a tipping point.
It is, certainly, and we're all very sorry to hear about the number of cases of players that, have been reported with early onset dementia and other neurological issues. And we do know that there is evidence to suggest that repetitive head injuries are associated with neurological disorders. And we have known that these cases were going to be brought forward. But it definitely does point to the fact that we have to do all that we can at this moment in time, given the knowledge that we have at this moment in time, to ensure that we are putting player welfare at the heart of everything that we do.
It's not the case that rugby is an inherently dangerous game because of the nature of the collisions during the course of it.
Rugby is a contact sport, and there are many other contact sports. We do know that contact sports and the risk of collision can then lead to head injury. So there is certainly a risk associated with rugby, but there are ways that we can improve what happens currently to protect players. So again, for instance, looking at how much contact is happening in training to reduce the overall load of contact for players. We also again can look at the recovery times on the other side to make sure that we are giving adequate recovery for the brain after it's had sustained an injury.
Do you think you're being listened to?
We certainly have had the opportunity. Last summer we presented our information to World Rugby. A number of different subgroups were established, and our findings have been presented to World Rugby. We would hope that far more of our recommendations would be taken on board. We also understand very much that this is an evolving area. There are many differing opinions currently around, the overall risk, and it is an area that is evolving, and that's why we're very passionate about contributing to the evidence base, so that we are actually making sure that our policies are informed by research, and ensuring that we're putting the best foot forward for the players.
I'm struck by one of your colleagues in the group, Professor John Fairclough, and what he said recently in an interview. He said, we have to stop the parade of people coming off the field with head injuries. It is catastrophic for the future of the game if changes aren't made as a matter of urgency.
Yeah, and we do feel we are at a tipping point. It is, the time is now really to ensure that we're putting actions going forward to make sure that changes that we know can be made are made, which will again ensure the future of the game. Because if we don't do something urgently, parents will be put off allowing their children play rugby, because people will be afraid to put children on the pitch if they don't believe that there are proper protocols in place to ensure safety.
At the crux of it, that people will look on from the sidelines. For instance, recently during the New Zealand tour, the game against the Maoris, we had Jeremy Lockman clearly dazed, being taken off for HIA and then sent back on a couple of minutes later, and clearly not in any fit state to play the game. And there were other cases as well in the July window. Isn't that the sort of thing that sort of would send a shiver down anybody's spine?
It is certainly, when you see very obvious cases and people at home, Twitter erupted at the time for us in particular, and we were very vocal about it as a group after that occurred. You don't want to see those instances where somebody is clearly concussed on the pitch and is allowed back onto the pitch. And that's where protocols need to be stringently adhered to. And the whole, it's rolled out, but it's a very useful phrase: if in doubt, sit them out. If there is any doubt at all that somebody has sustained a head injury, it is imperative that they're not allowed back on and that they go through the proper protocols.
Another situation again, which I think a lot of rugby fans found a little bit confusing, in the case of Johnny Sexton after the first test. He failed HIA 1, but subsequently passed HIA 2 and HIA 3 and was able to play 7 days later. Isn't that a little bit confusing as well?
It is confusing, and certainly the current HIA, and other members of Progressive Rugby have spoken about this vocally. The current HIA protocols, are somewhat flawed and not fit for purpose. Again, this is a very difficult area. If somebody breaks a leg, it's very clear. Brain injury is much harder currently to diagnose. At the time when all of that happened, and I spoke about this on other programs, our feeling was that even if Johnny Sexton did pass the subsequent HIAs, that given his past history, it would have been in the interest of player welfare to allow him to rest when there were other players that could have also been given an opportunity.
But it's not just concussion, sure it isn't, that Progressive Rugby are concerned with.
No, we're concerned about overall player welfare and making sure that at all stages of a player's career, that they are looked after, in particular as well when players have retired from the game, that there are mechanisms put in place to ensure that that we're still managing their overall health and they're not forgotten about. After players get to the end of their career, some players would wonder what's going to happen to them. Like, some players might leave the game in their mid-20s, for instance. There's a long life left ahead of you, and health problems may occur much later on in life, so it's to make sure that we're always looking after players even after they have come, and sometimes an untimely early end to their career.
And you made the point very much earlier in the interview that the people who are in progressive rugby are fans of rugby, they're not anti-rugby.
Oh, completely. Anybody that does follow me on Twitter knows that I am an absolute rugby nut, but that would be the whole group. I mean, the group is there because we are so passionate about the game and we don't want the game to die off, and we do strongly feel that if action isn't taken urgently, that could be at risk of happening. But as a collective, you won't meet a group of people who love the game more.
So the next plan of action for progressive rugby is to present a dossier, is it, to World Rugby on its findings?
Yeah, we have a number of subgroups in progressive rugby. We meet very regularly where we update each other on different events and different communications that have been happening. And we are continuously updating World Rugby on the information that we put together.
And some of that work would be done at your own concussion research centre at ADU.
Yeah, so the Irish Concussion Research Centre that we established, a lot of our work feeds into the progressive rugby work. We hosted an international concussion conference here at ATU Galway a few months ago, and we have another one coming up in September, on September 23rd, where we'll be bringing again together a range of international experts in the area of concussion. It's a free open session for anybody that might be interested in learning more.
And looking down the road, we say 5 years, what would your hope be?
My hope would be that we are extending the length of time in between when elite players come back following a confirmed case of concussion, that we are implementing all available evidence in our protocols to ensure that we're protecting players. We've been asking for a reduction rather than an increase in the number of international games, and that we are certainly monitoring and adjusting the amount of time that players spent in contact and training, because it is the cumulative effect that often has an implication for players.
And that's Dr. Lisa Ryan there from the Atlantic Technological University, previously known as GMIT. She also co-runs the Irish Concussion Research Centre at the ATU.